Good morning and welcome to Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. Welcome to all members, friends, and guests here in person and virtually. My name is Myrna Peterson and I am a member of your Board of Trustees. Today's service is led by our interim minister, Reverend Dr. Teresa Cooley, who is joined by our talented staff musician, Wells Lang, and guest musician, Steve Stapenhorst. Thank you for joining us as we continue to Please take this time to silence your devices as we begin our service. Thank you for joining us as we continue to prioritize connection over perfection in this hybrid service, which is streamed on YouTube and is being recorded for future viewing. Seating is available in the back if you don't want to appear on the recording. We will continuously learn and adapt to create joyful opportunities to be together while keeping our community safe. There are many ways to connect with our church community throughout the week, both in person and virtually. Whether you're new or are ready to find new ways to engage, please visit our website and social media to learn more. Once each month, beginning today, board members will be available at a table on the patio for drop-in conversations. Say hello, bring your questions, and share ideas about the church. Though all board members always welcome the chance to talk with congregants, we've scheduled these opportunities the week before each board meeting to hear from you. If you participate virtually and want to connect, you can find our church email addresses on our beautiful new website at neighborhooduu.org. Now that the church year is up and running, please remember that pledge payments are the environmentally friendly fuel that keep us going. Contact Operations Director Elizabeth Campo with questions about pledging or making payments. Join us next Sunday as we welcome the Reverend Dr. Lee Barker back to the Neighborhood Church pulpit. Between services, join Reverend Barker, Reverend Teresa, and church historian Ned Racine in a discussion about the history of governance, leadership, and change at Neighborhood Church. Neighborhood Church upholds a covenant of right relations through which we commit to act so that the needs of the individual and the greater faith community can be in harmony. We covenant to honor one another, engage one another, and give to one another and our institution. Again, welcome to Neighborhood Church. Welcome to this caring community guided by faith, connected by love, spirit, and service.
Good morning. So wonderful to see you here this morning. I'm so glad that you are all with us. Our invocation comes from the great mystic poet Rabindranath Tagore. When the heart is hard and parched, come upon me with a shower of mercy. When grace is lost from life, come with a burst of song. When tumultuous work raises its din on all sides, shutting me out from beyond, come to me, God of silence, with your peace and rest. When my beggarly heart sits crouched, shut up in a corner, break open the door, my God. When desire blinds the mind with delusion and dust, O Holy One, come with your light. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. My name is Monica Villegas, and I'm a member of the choir, and I'm here to help lead you in our first opening hymn. Wells is going to play it through one time first. So please rise as you are able and join us in hymn 10:10. We give thanks.
Each Sunday, our congregation expands our impact by dedicating 100% of contributions to a local nonprofit organization. You can give through our website using text to give or the QR code or box available at the exit. If you want to make a payment towards your pledge, make a note in the subject line or use an envelope available in the box outside. This week, our gifts go to the local nonprofit Altadena Arts. I'd like to invite its executive director and neighborhood church member, Eugene Hutchins, up to the chancel to tell us more about Altadena Arts.
Good morning, Neighborhood Church. It's so nice to see all of you here. Thank you very much for the gift of this offering. Altadena Arts is very young. We came about in the midst of the pandemic. I was with my son visiting Charles White Park in Altadena. And I had a vague idea who Charles White was. I knew he was an artist. But when I was at the park, I noticed there was something missing. There was nothing at Charles White Park that would tell you who Charles White was. And it sparked my curiosity. And I began to want to learn more about who Charles White was. And I've quickly found that he was one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. And they gave him the honor of dedicating the park upon his death in 1979, but then there was nothing there. And that affronted me deeply as one of the great artists, because there's only a handful of public parks in the United States named for artists, and only one of two named for a African-American black artist. Yet he lived in Altadena for about almost 30 years, had a studio here in Pasadena, actually near Castle Green. And if you go to the Dr. Mary Bethune Branch Library near Exposition Park, you will see his last public art commission. He was dedicated to elevating the voices, the imagery of Black and African American people, their history, their stories, their struggles. It was extraordinary. The detail in his paintings, and his drawings, his murals, and he did that through public art, through his work, all throughout his life. And that's what inspired Altadena Arts to come to be, is that even now, there are no public art in Altadena that was commissioned by the LA County Department of Arts and Culture, formerly known as the LA County Arts Commission. Altadena is unincorporated LA County, so they're our local arts agency. Also, what was amazing as I learned more about Charles White is that he was also a phenomenal teacher. He taught at Otis College of Art and Design, and many of his students have gone on to careers as professional artists, but he had a powerful impact. And all of this is what Altadena Arts, as a young organization, is beginning to do. So public art. So our first step is to correct that gross oversight of having something at public art piece at Charles White Park that celebrates Charles White. But also, we've already commissioned 12 artists to create work for Altadena Arts. Done that through our Art of the Month collection. And also, the story of artists of color, BIPOC artists, women artists, artists with disabilities have been so marginalized from the curriculum in the arts that we are now bringing that back in. And so we piloted an arts education program in the spring called Seeing Ourselves, where we share the story of Charles White. It began with a 3-week residency at Averson School of Leaders. It's a public charter school here in Altadena. And they like it so much now we're expanding it to 10 weeks. So more artists of color, more women artists, artists with disabilities are being brought into the curriculum so they know there and allow them to be able to see themselves reflected in the curriculum, their contributions. And coming up on October 23rd, there used to be an arts festival that, again, elevated the memory of Charles White that started in 1980 after the park was dedicated. It ended in the early 90s. We are reviving that, and that's going to be going up on October 23rd at the park. We have 12 artists, 5 professional bands, playing a wide assortment of music and artists of different genres and styles like light art, sculpture, painting. It's all going to be at the park. It's going to be a fun day, and I hope you all attend. But your support today goes all directly into these programs that reframe and refocus the arts in there. So we've already engaged teaching artists. They're going into the schools now. We've gotten grant support already from the Tournament of Roses Foundation and the Wilhelm Foundation, and we're just barely a year old. So you're here at the beginning. So thank you so much for your generosity and your support. It's so great to see you all.
I understand now why everybody is so compelled to say good morning. This is an amazing sight. To be humble, to be kind. It is a giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend. To give in such a way that has no end. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. To be bold and to be brave. It is a thinking that the heart can still be saved. And the darkness can come quick. The danger lies in anger, hanging on to it. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. Tell me what it is that you see. A world that's full of endless possibility. And heroes don't look like they used to. They look like you do. We are love. We are one. We are how we treat each other. When the day is done, we are peace. We are war. We are how we treat each other. Nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
Thank you, Steve. Let us join together in the spirit of prayer, of meditation, of reflection, as we ground our bodies and open our spirits. Consider that you live today only a little lower than the angels. The next lines could have been written close enough to see what they see, hear what they hear, touch what they touch. Close enough to sigh in the dark and know your sigh is heard. Close enough to be overcome by awe and understand that you are both part of the awe and that it is beyond you. Close enough to see a leaf fall and light hang on the horizon and winter come again without you fearing it. Close enough to trust that you can speak what cannot be translated into anything but your particular life. Amen. We all come into this space with other people on our minds and hearts, people who may be going through a difficult time, people perhaps that we lost, people that are perhaps celebrating. And so we want to take a moment to bring those people metaphorically into this space so that we can welcome them into our community. If you like, you can share these joys and concerns in our book of life that's found in the foyer, in the narthex. But let us take a moment to bring them into this room.
Please join us in singing hymn number 15 in your gray hymnal. And again, Wells will play it through once. It's called The Lone Wild Bird. And you can rise if you're able.
Our reading is from the Sufi mystic, Rumi. One night a man was crying, Allah, Allah. His lips grew sweet with the praising, until a cynic said to him, so I've heard you calling out, but have you gotten any response? The man had no answer to that, and he quit praying and fell into a confused sleep. He dreamed that he saw Kirir, the guide of souls, in a thick green foliage. Kirir said, "Why did you stop praying?" He said, "Because I've never heard anything back." But he said, "This longing that you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup." Rumi.
Now the equipment's right. I'm just going to start that again. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Sometimes late at night, my bed shakes. I don't look. Just close my eyes and hope an earthquake lets me off the hook. Then morning comes around, and I get to thinking I could live a lifetime like this. Just this. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Sometimes I feel laid out, played out, frayed out, just a mess. I can't believe I ever made out to impress. A clothes horse will ride when the naked truth will make the hurtin' subside. Ride on, ride on. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand the heat, a cool wind blows in. Talk about your leaders of the world. I wouldn't know, 'cause I'm too busy working up a sweat, waiting for the wind to blow. From somewhere it comes, and I get to thinking I could live a lifetime of this. All of this, all of this. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand thee, the cool wind blows in. Every time I'm thinking I can't stand thee, the cool wind blows in.
So much talent in this congregation. One of the weirdest things about doing an interim during pandemic times is the uneven way in which I have been able to get to know you or not to get to know you. Not only have we not always had many chances to meet in person, many of you have not been able to tune in to worship online for a variety of reasons. I can understand who needs one more Zoom meeting a week. But it presents me with a dilemma. As an interim minister, I use preaching as a way for you to get to know me and my theory of ministry. But since many of you haven't been attending worship, some of you know me pretty well, some of me hardly at all, some of you have heard almost all my sermons, some none at all. So I'll be periodically repeating some sermons from last year. Hopefully not a bore for those who've heard it before. And I doubt you probably remember it, the details. In particular, I think it's important for you to learn how I understand spirituality, as that can be such a sticky wicket in Unitarian Universalist churches, where people have so many different theological and spiritual perspectives. But particularly now, when I believe we are desperately in need of spiritual practices, in whatever form we can find them, as we navigate our way through this unbelievably stressful time. In one of the churches that I served, I had a running conversation with a member who considered himself an atheist. And whenever I used kind of traditional religious language or spiritual language in a service, he really struggled with that, not because he was being contrarian, he just didn't get it. Until the day his daughter was born. And he came to talk to me about it afterwards. He said, I never thought I could feel that way. I just felt flooded with light and like there was no me separate from my daughter or my wife. We were of one body surrounded by light. He started paying attention then to other things that he had never paid attention to before. And why he didn't have that kind of awe-filled experience again, at least that I know of, he told me he felt forever opened to some different ways of seeing the world after that. I think relatively few people get to experience that kind of blinding sense of oneness. But at some level, I believe most of us crave the chance to do so. Whether it's a conscious thought or not, I think it's part of what brings us to church. Even if you're not saying, I want to have a mystical experience every day, I think most of us come to church seeking a sense of peace, a sense of meaning, a sense of connection. Connection with others, but also connection with something beyond ourselves. Wayne Teasdale, in his book, The Mystic Heart, said, "Fortunately, everyone is a mystic. At some deep level, we know that we are not mutually alienated from each other and that we do have sufficient being. Unfortunately, most of us have not raised that awareness, that knowing, to our explicit consciousness enough to transform our embodied life. So what would it be like to let it transform our embodied life? How do we nurture those experiences? Can we nurture those experiences? How do we reconcile those with our more rational ways of understanding life? Talking about mysticism and spirituality is a little like what someone once said about talking about poetry. They said, talking about poetry is like dancing about architecture. Talking about and mysticism are kind of opposite from one another, because mysticism and mystical experiences defy concrete description by their very nature. The poet Catherine Mosby said, "The way to grace is unique and ineffable. It has to be intuited rather than explained. Much of what attracts us to the spiritual is its mystery, its ability to elude language. It's not surprising then to find language getting in the way more often than it shows the way. Perhaps that's why some of us more readily make a connection through the senses, a sight or a smell, a piece of music, a work of art. This oblique approach occasionally finds access that the direct one cannot." So if that's the case, I've kind of set an impossible task for myself today, trying to talk about mysticism and spirituality in this sermon. But as much as I like to think I do have great powers as a preacher, I'm not really here today to give you a spiritual experience so much as I would like to encourage you to open yourselves up to them, to many, to a way of living that allows the less than rational, what I like to call the trans-rational. Again, Catherine Mosby says, in 1817, Keats wrote, "I am certain of nothing but the holiness of the heart's affection and the truth of the imagination." Cultivation of the soul might be as simple as listening to one's heart and examining the different moments of one's life. I agree with Mosby that this is one of the most important ways, listening to our hearts, but it's not always easy or simple to do so. We live in the midst of a culture that demands exactly the opposite from us, that constantly tugs our attention with the latest this or the latest that, or that assaults our spirit with the endless news cycle of doom and gloom. Various addictions are readily available to help us numb our pains, but which also keep us from doing that deeper listening. Even people who are actively pursuing a spiritual path don't always do so in a way that takes them really in that direction. The great Buddhist teacher and psychologist Jack Kornfield said, "Since beginning to teach, I've seen how many other students misunderstand spiritual practice, how many have hoped to use it to escape from their lives, how many have used its ideals and language as a way to avoid pain and difficulty, how many have entered temples, churches, monasteries, looking for the special effects, looking for the special effects." A friend of mine who came from a Catholic background decided that he wanted to explore Buddhism, and he completely immersed himself in it trying to learn the practice. He spent 1.5 years going to retreats and classes and trying to learn the practice. And then all of a sudden one day, he told me that he had just quit. I said, Mark, why did you quit? You were so into that for so long. And he said, well, suddenly I realized that what I was trying to do was to become the best Buddhist I could be. And that's really not quite the point. Like Cornfield, I have not found spiritual practice to be simple or painless. I spent 7 years in spiritual direction midway through my ministry. 3 of those years, my director guided me through a spiritual exercise developed by St. Ignatius of Loyola. And let me tell you, those exercises are not for the faint of heart. They take you into the heart of your deepest griefs and challenge the very core of your being. It was hard work, and many of the days as I was driving to her house, I would wonder, why am I putting myself through this? But there were many times when I left her home that my heart felt lighter, the world seemed brighter, even on the gloomiest of days. So I can hear some of you thinking, boy, you make it sound so easy, Teresa, so appealing. And indeed, when we do have the mountaintop experiences that I described in the beginning, there's always the inevitable falling back down to earth. Or as Jack Kornfield titled one of his books, after the ecstasy, the laundry. Best title ever. But I can tell you that if I had not taken the time and the energy and made the space to do that spiritual work, I would not be the person standing before you today. I would be a brittle, angry, and cynical person, which is the person I was beginning to become. Not everyone needs to go to such lengths or depths of spiritual practice. Early in my ministry, I really struggled with the whole concept of prayer. What should I pray? Who am I praying with? But I finally let go of those questions, like Rumi said in his story, and just started to speak, just started a practice that actually really worked for me then and still works for me today. I asked myself 3 questions. The first is, what am I grateful for? Who offered me kindness today? What opportunity arose in front of me? Doing this immediately reorients me from that complaining mindset I too easily fall into, and helps me remember that there are many blessings in my life. The second question is, what do I need to let go of? Is there some kind of hubris that I'm engaging in that makes me believe I have control over somebody or something that's happening? Is this really about me? Or can I just let go and let myself experience something rather than trying to fix it? Almost always the answer is yes. But the third question is, what do I need to accept and acknowledge about myself? Is there something that I, in fact, need to take responsibility for? Something that I might have been avoiding or expecting someone else would do for me? I find this practice of those 3 questions to automatically reorient me. It helps me breathe into the present, using gratitude as an entry point, which helps me to let down my defenses and look at things as they are rather than what I want them to be. Another spiritual practice I engage in daily is to simply read poetry and to reflect on what rises up in me when I do so. And that's why I use poetry quite often in worship. I find that poetry speaks to something, like I said, that trans-rational, something between rationality and spirituality. something beyond just the words. So whether it be poetry, the language of the soul, or music, the siren of the spirit, or walking in the woods, or writing in a journal, I ask you to consider giving yourself the gift of some kind of spiritual practice. You could attend the meditation group or the yoga group that we have here, or you could go online to one of the myriad of opportunities that are now accessible to us, simply to just create a reflective space in your life. It may take a bit to find a practice that really speaks to you. Not all of us respond to the same thing. But as we keep saying, times like this really demand that we care for our bodies and our spirits. The state of our souls is literally at stake. And I say this not just as a message to each of us individually. I do believe that opening ourselves up to less left brain ways of thinking all the time and honoring our right brain's way of integrating and finding meaning can be a practice for healing the world. There's nothing wrong with the left brain way of doing things, but so often that dominates our worlds and ourselves. There's a new way of thinking about the world that actually draws inspiration from the permaculture movement. This movement notices the systems and patterns that give us life and asks how we might model our ways of being on what we observe rather than what we can control. You've heard me speak a lot in the past about Adrienne Marie Brown, the activist and the poet. And she wrote a book called Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Shaping Worlds, which does the best job I've heard yet in explaining this amorphous movement. She says emergence is another way of speaking about the connective tissue of all that exists. The way, the Tao, the force, change, God, goddess, life. Birds flocking, cells splitting, fungi whispering underground. Emergence emphasizes critical connections over critical mass, building authentic relationships, listening with all of the senses of the mind and the body. With our human gift of reasoning, we've tried to control or overcome the emergent processes that are our own nature, the processes of the planet that we live on, the universe that we call home. And the result is crisis at each scale that we are aware of, from our deepest inner moral sensibilities to the collective scale of climate and planetary health and beyond. I believe that this kind of direction of thought, which encourages us to use our whole way of being in the world, which calls upon us to be and to observe and to connect to one another rather than to control, has great potential for us as a community, for us as a world. When I think about what we want to live into in this new normal that we are going to try to create, that we are creating, it is this wisdom that I want to cling to. Attending to the spiritual life doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be serious or intense. It can be as simple as lifting our arms and our faces to the sun. It can be losing ourselves in the music or burrowing into the warmth of poetry. It could be whatever calls to you, that calls you out of yourself, that helps you to see, to hear, to breathe, to attend to this great pulsing life that simmers within us all. Gratitude, acceptance, release. Let yourself feel the healing powers within all. Amen.
Our closing hymn is number 10 in your gray hymnal. It's called Immortal Love. Please join us and rise if you are able.
Seated. Our benediction comes from the poet Anne Hillman. We look with uncertainty beyond the old choices for clear-cut answers to a softer, more permeable aliveness, which is every moment at the brink of death. For something new is being born in us, if we but let it. We stand at a new doorway, awaiting that which comes, daring to be human creatures, vulnerable to the beauty of existence, learning to love. So may it be. I'm happy to greet you outside, whether you want to give me a hug or not. That's fine.